Certainly no city has had it better this winter than Boston. The Bruins are atop the Eastern Conference after making a late run at the Tampa Bay Lightning. Bruce Cassidy has punched all the right buttons for the black and gold. For the Celtics, everybody knows what happens 5 minutes into the season with Gordon Hayward, yet Brad Stevens and the Celtics making a late run at the Raptors atop the Eastern Conference. Simple question, guys. Who's had the better year? Bruce Cassidy of the Bruins, Brad Stevens of the Celtics?
It's Brad Stevens. There's no question about it. Like you said, starts off the year, Gordon Hayward immediately out. He's only had Kyrie Irving for 60 games. He's got no Marcus Smart. Daniel Tice is out for the year. The injuries that he's had to face are almost unfathomable. And the fact that he still has them in contention for the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference and beating teams like the Toronto Raptors, it's incredible. It's got to be Brad Stevens.
See, I agree. I think I'll go you a step further. I think Brad Stevens is having the greatest regular season coaching performance in Celtics history. Yes, that's not hyperbole. If you take a look at what the Celtics have had to overcome, there's never been a better regular season performance by a head coach in Celtics history. However, when you take a look at where the Bruins were about 2 months into the season, they were all but left for dead in terms of finishing atop the Eastern Conference. Tampa Bay was running away with the Eastern Conference, but yet somehow Bruce Cassidy got it together and got his players to believe, and he went through major portions of this season without as many injuries as any coach in the NHL, losing Patrice Bergeron for almost a month.
Yeah, I think when you're comparing Cassidy and Stevens, you can kind of throw the injuries out because they both had to deal with it, but look at the team that Cassidy inherited. This was barely a playoff team last year. They needed a great late run by Brad Marchand to just sneak in, and then got embarrassed by the Ottawa Senators. There really wasn't much roster change. Now, there are kids playing this year that weren't playing last year, but whose idea was it to play them? Bruce Cassidy. We know what this team was without him. He's really the only change, and look what they've become. Whereas on the flip side, we don't know what the Celtics would be without Brad Stevens. Would they be in contention for the 1 seed? Probably not. Would they be a competitive team in that Eastern Conference, still with Kyrie Irving for most of the year, still with Al Horford? Probably. I think when you saw what the Bruins were without Cassidy, and then you have almost no roster change, Bruce Cassidy steps in, gets them into the playoffs in the back half of last season, and then does what he did this season. I think for 2017, 2018, Bruce Cassidy's the coach of Boston. One more thing, what you said about the greatest coaching performance in Celtics history. There's a guy whose name is on the floor who might disagree with you. Just saying.
Yes, understood. But when you take a look at how many games were expected to be played in the Red Auerbach and Tommy Heinsohn era, he had most of his players available.
Right.
Brad Stevens didn't have his players available for like half the season this year, and still he has a team that could finish #1 in the Eastern Conference.
No, that is fair. Every button he's pressed has worked. But again, you could say the same for Cassidy, and you saw the flip side of Cassidy's team. Now, it would be interesting if, say, Brad Stevens, it was his first year in Boston, and we could compare it to the previous year, but Brad Stevens took a team last year that was completely different and got him in. Now, overall, that probably says Brad Stevens is a better coach. I think if we're talking about who's the better coach career, it's Brad Stevens. But for just this season, I got to go Cassidy because he took a team that people thought last year was a lost cause. Remember, going into the season, people wanted them to sell. They wanted Chara traded. They wanted Rass traded. There was even talk of Bergeron, Marchand being traded. Look where we are just a few months later. Bruce Cassidy has captivated this town with that team. You need look no further than the Michael Felger commercial.
Okay, right. And the Bruins marketing department did a brilliant job with that. 2 points on Bruce Cassidy. Since Claude Julien was let go, 65 wins, 25 losses. That's an astounding statistic. And if you take a look at the game the Bruins played in Philadelphia after pounding Florida the day before, and they come back and get a point out of that game, that told me all I needed to know about how great a job Bruce Cassidy has done, but still not as good of a job, I think, as Brad Stevens with the 2017-18 Boston Celtics.